Hey, nonprofits, let's raise more money. For this episode, Jason and Trevor talk about focusing on what you're good at and why the best investment you can make is anything that develops yourself. Let's get right into it.
You and I talk about this constantly where it's noble and it's dignified that I don't care if your job is to mop the floor. You just used this, analogy the other day. It's like, hey, if my job at the restaurant is to sweep the floor, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be the best floor sweeper that there is. There's nobility in that. There's nobility in, hey, even if this isn't the task I see myself doing the rest of my life, this is my job and I'm going to be exceptional at it. And I also think there's a massive layer that's overlooked. And I know that people that we listen to say this a lot, probably. And hopefully people that are listening to this see this often is, it takes time to get exceptional at something. It takes patience. It takes discipline. But the fruits of your labors, whether it takes 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 10,000 hours, we've heard all these different time frames and chronology. It doesn't matter. There is so much good and so much benefit to striving to be great at something. And the cool thing about it is, Jason, there's always something that we can be great at. There's at least one thing. You're great with your kids. You're great with your wife. You're great with your husband. You can be great at something, and we're telling people to pour into that and why it's so important.
Well, I think the reason that comes up, this is what I believe in my experience is, if you've ever been doing something and I had a guy tell me when I first got on the fire department a long time ago, I was 21 years old. And he just made a comment. He goes, anything worth doing is worth doing right.
Mm.
And his point to that was, and I didn't, I picked it up. I mean, I grew up on I'm a farm boy. I grew up, on a farm and where we worked. And so I've worked since I was 12 years old. So, and I worked around people that worked really hard. So I learned that work ethic. But here's the part where the light came on for me. You're out there, let's say that you're out picking weeds, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you're on the side of the house that nobody's ever going to see. And, there's a few there and you're like, well, do I really need to go pick those? You don't.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to see it, but you are. And the point is when we start striving to do well for ourselves and we think that way, I'm going to do a good job. I want to do better because I can. I want to do my best because it's there. You're going to know. You're going to know what your standard is. I think you get better because of that. I think
100%.
It rises, it raises all boats. When you have a standard, it raises all boats. I think the deal is to strive to be exceptional. Because I think there's some things, you could be, you may be pretty good at something, but maybe you're not exceptional. I don't know, it's not really quantifiable. Saying, well, I'm an exception is not quantifiable, but
Sure.
Perfection, striving, and I don't mean be a perfectionist. There's some people, well, I'm a perfectionist. And I've heard people say that, well, I'm really a perfectionist. And I'm like, well, you weren't perfect the way you just tried to sweep the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So don't, you can't be a part-time don't be a part-time perfectionist.
Throw those terms around like that.
Just try to do a good job. I think that's the whole thing is try to do things that you do them as well as you possibly can. And if you do that, you're going to get better. And then repetition, if you find something that you have a proclivity to, that you have an enjoyment to, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And you don't have to be good at everything, but if you're really good at something, it typically bleeds over into other things.
100%. Yeah, you get a lot of juice out of it. I was having a conversation.
And your point, what you just said is really good. I think that's something important to say. You just said you get a lot of juice out of it.
Yeah.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's wins,
it's
man.
Self-affirmation that you're telling yourself because the number one influence that people have on themselves is their own thinking.
Oh, God.
The number one.
100%. Yep. Affirmations, negative self-talk, good, bad, indifferent, anything in between. Man, oh man, you're in control of those. You're in control of those thoughts.
And I was listening to a deal with Tim Tebow the other day. Big fan.
Oh, cool.
Big fan of Tim Tebow.
Good dude, charitable dude.
And he said, somebody was saying, what do you do if you're starting to feel kind of down or you're starting to feel that way? Because he's like that guy. It's up, and he goes, I immediately go out and find somebody else to help.
Yeah.
I get it from turning it inward. He goes, because when we're feeling bad and we're down, it's very inward. We're looking into ourselves. He said, but as soon as we start helping someone, in other words, not helping myself, I'm helping someone else to do whatever it is, as soon as I start doing that, well, then it becomes outward, and I start helping other people. It doesn't become about me.
Yep.
And whenever I do it, well, then I get something back, and it takes me out of that.
100%.
And I think it's the same thing with
who doesn't
work.
like helping other people? Yeah.
But I think it's the same thing with what's your point about striving to be exceptional. Be exceptional at something, is that when you do that, it's what you're getting back. I mean, you're doing something for yourself in that moment.
Yeah, 100%. And you're stacking. These are steps. This is a process. This takes time. I was talking to your son earlier today, and we were talking about certain tasks, and he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I was feeling some nerves. And I was like, well, I'm glad. And we just had this with a guest recently that coaches nonprofits to ask for big asks with Fortune 500 companies. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking to her on this podcast recently, and I was talking to your son about the same thing. He's like, I had nerves. And I was like, hey, man, if you're not nervous, that kind of tells me you don't care. Do you know what I mean? You can be as prepared as you want to be, but you don't know the outcome of all these situations. You don't know the outcome. We don't know. No one has a crystal ball. So if we're working towards something, we don't know what the end result is going to look like, because that's how life shakes out. Hey, of course it's okay to be a little bit nervous, but you got to fight through that, right? And that's what made me think of that with the repetition. You get better and you get better and you get better. However, nerves are okay too. And it's okay to do stuff that scares you a little bit. It's okay to have goals that scare you a little bit along the way. I think that's okay. I think that's healthy. It's just, I don't know if people take time to think about it enough. Like, what am I working towards? I know that you and I talk about this all the time. It's like a never-ending loop about self-awareness and understanding who you are. I also think it's really, really important to understand what you're good at. And I think it's okay to lean into those skills. It's okay to teach yourself new ones, but I think it's really okay to understand what you're good at and lean into it and develop that. And it's really okay to invest in yourself, to hone those skills and make yourself exceptional at those things. It's okay.
And whenever you're not good at something, but it's something that you want to do, then work at it. It takes work. I don't care who you are. Be coachable. There are some people that are born with gifts. Maybe they're physical, maybe they're mental, maybe, they say, well, that person's got the gift of gab, or that person, wow, they're just they got speed. I mean, there's certain things, that you have.
Yeah.
But those without practice and effort and training go nowhere.
There's not a lot of Ken Griffey Juniors out there that are born that can swing a baseball bat like that. You know what I mean? Right?
Well, the GOAT retired today. I mean,
Tom
Brady, just announced and hung it up. He said, it's for real this time. I'm done.
He's also 46 years old. Wow.
Well, yeah, he's 46 years old.
Bro.
But here's the point. He wasn't the best athlete on the planet. He wasn't the fastest. In fact,
he seemed downright slow to me at sometimes. Yeah.
No, he was ultra slow. Yeah,
I just actually watched a football game that he played in person. It was really cool.
There's a deal going around where there was a video, and you couldn't really find it. It was kind of obscure, and I think somebody finally dug it up. It was from the combine that he was in, and he was painfully slow.
Yeah,
painfully slow.
Yeah, it's a little different story these days with quarterbacks,
but
isn't it?
But even there, I mean, guy's got 7 Super Bowl championships. He's the greatest of all time. There's nobody better. But here's where my point.
Yeah.
He worked really hard. Really hard at it.
Seemed like it. Yep.
And
he almost obsessed.
Yeah, I mean, singularly focused. We've talked about Kobe Bryant, singularly obsessed about being the best. Yes, naturally gifted, absolutely. Yeah, the guy's already, is a freak athlete, but
God rest his soul.
He worked harder than anybody else. And he just said, I'm just going to outwork everybody. Didn't have to.
Did I ever tell you that story? There's so much good stuff out on the internet right now with interviews with Kobe Bryant. Did I ever tell you that one story? I read an article about Kobe, and he's getting ready for the Olympics. And He's talking. This is an account from a strength and conditioning coach. So Kobe wants to get stronger. Natural maturation in the NBA. Guys get stronger. Michael Jordan wanted to get stronger because he's getting pushed around by the Detroit Pistons, things like that. Kobe wants to get stronger. He's like, yeah, man, I heard you do a lot of good work. Why don't we get together and get a lift in? And the guy's like, oh my God, I get to lift with Kobe Bryant and train Kobe Bryant. This is like a dream come true. Who gets to work with the best basketball player in the world, in the gym. And the guy's like, okay, how about we meet let's meet in the weight room. And he's like, what time works for you? And Kobe's 6 a.m. The guy goes, okay, cool, I'll be there. So he shows up the next day at 6 a.m. And he said it was really weird. He said Kobe Bryant showed up for the workout and he was drenched in sweat. And he's like, hey, man, am I late? He's like, I don't know what's going on. He's like, no, man, I've been in the gym since 4 because I wanted to get 1,000 shots up today. And I got 500 done before we lift, so I got to go do another 500 when we're done. But I just wanted to get the ball rolling. He was such a nut about time. There's a great interview with him where he's like in a forum of people probably talking to a bunch of like entrepreneurs or what have you, right? And he's talking about how like, well, I figured out that if I got up at 2:30 in the morning and everyone else gets up at 6:30, so I get 4 hours more per day. Like the guy was weird with all the stuff going out there that I believe in, like sleep trackers and all that stuff. He was like,
I know the interview you're talking about, and what he said was, I get 3 hours or 2 more hours a day working out.
Yeah, exactly. But he didn't sleep. The cat didn't sleep.
He did. So it's like, he did, but it was all programmed. But he said, I get 2 hours more time a day in.
Yeah,
that's 5 days. That's times 5 days a week.
He's like, that's 10 more hours a week.
In 10 years, you'll never catch me.
Exactly.
You'll never catch me. So his point was, but here's the thing. I think the point all this means is, it takes work. It takes practice. There is no, somebody's, oh man, they're a natural born this or a natural born that. Yeah, they may have some genetic makeup or something where they've got an advantage, but in the long term, and you know this because you played baseball in college, you're a professional athlete. All the people that were really naturally good, it all goes away at about the age of 12.
Yeah, at some point.
It's like they fall off a cliff. The ones that didn't work at it fall off a cliff. They're done. You'll never see them in junior high and high school, and they'll never make it. But the kids that sucked, but they worked really hard or they wanted to do it, all of a sudden that's the great equalizer, and that's where everything goes. Because the ones that work at it and put the work in, you can see them go get better. And it's the same thing, but it's also back to the whole thing. We're not. We're talking about professional athletes as examples, but
we always default to athletics. Sorry, everybody.
Well, it's because it's something everybody can kind of somewhat relate to. But let's just go back to the whole thing about sweeping the floor.
Yeah.
If you sweep it right the first time and you know that you swept it right, you're probably going to do everything else. It's kind of like making your bed in the morning. Mm-hmm. My wife and I make our bed every morning, and I will tell you, she's very particular about how it's done. Mm-hmm. She's particular about a lot of things, and in a good way.
She is.
But she's specific and particular.
I got some funny stories about that.
And
oh my God!
But that leads up because that's how she starts her. We start our day, and we do it together every morning.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
cool.
Sometimes I'll like go downstairs, or I'm getting some coffee, or I'm doing something with the dog. Come back, she's already whipped that baby out. It's already done. I'm like, oh man, I missed out. And I'm not trying to dodge it, but that's just something happens. And my point of that is, there are things that every average person, not the professional athletes, that want to become exceptional, there are habits and things that you can do to help propel yourself in that way.
Absolutely.
Because it's not everybody else that's watching, because, nobody's going to give us, it's not like, oh, hey, man, you guys, wow, great job. You guys made your bed today.
You're not getting flowers for that.
No. You're not going to get flowers. Nobody's going to notice if you swept the floor perfectly, but they notice when you don't. And you will know. You will know that that's done right. You can't, it's done.
I love the sweeping the floor thing because I swept the floor at my parents' restaurant for years, thousands of times over and over and over again. And my old man was like, hey, man, I got an idea. He's just like, hey, this is something that you could take with you for the rest of your life. He's like, just do it right the first time. It's going to save you time. just do it right the first time. And he was very prideful about that kind of stuff because he came from a union flooring background and stuff. And he's like, yeah, we're union. We do it right the first time. Is what he always used to tell me when I was like, I'm like 12 years old. Go, what does that mean? I don't know. Union. I'm not in a union, man. I work for you. But so funny. I had a thing. I'm afraid to tell people this, and I could adjust it based on the task. I got into running with no running background. And it was not super easy, obviously. And then I started getting into races. I was like, oh, those people are doing races. I think that's what I should be doing. I'll start doing races. And fast forward and running, hitting my head against the wall at long races and doing ultras and stuff like that. I developed something in my life that I've taken with me forever. And like I said, sometimes I'm apprehensive to tell people this because of the time investment. But I used to say to myself, or I had a rule I developed for myself that said, it takes 3 years to get really good at something. So just, hey, if you're going to start, awesome. Pour yourself into it. Go all in. You know what I mean? That's running, 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day. You're running 4 hours on the weekend, but that's week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. And talk to me after 3 years. That kind of thing. And because I did it and I was like, oh my goodness, that's just a huge investment. You know what I mean? But that's okay. That's okay.
It's like having the drive-through mentality. Well, I'm just going to drive through and grab it fast. There's nothing, and I go through the drive-through. It's been a long time since I've been through one, but because you get this instant deal. Is it the best for you? No. Are you going to get, if you do it often, is it going to be the best for you? No. So it takes time for results. I think that's the biggest thing is patience. Patience is the hardest thing for people to understand. And that's where the exceptional part.
Be patient, especially with yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You just said, I want to run. I'm going to learn how to run. So I got to go do this to get good at it. It's going to take me 3 years. It took you 3 years. Wasn't it 3 years before you won your first race?
Homie, it took me like 3 years before. And it was like, oh my God, I got to run 4 hours every Saturday in the woods. I got, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got to get, that kind of thing. And then I remember, I will say this though, I do remember I had a lot of support at the time. I got sponsored. It was awesome. I felt exceptionally fortunate, exceptionally flattered. I had amazing people around me that were helping me, usher me along. Kind of early on in a sport that's really grown where I wouldn't even have possibly had that opportunity now because the people are so fast. But I remember I won my first race. Yes. And I was 24 years old. I won my first ultra and I had already probably ran 15, 20 of them. And I cried. I wasn't even done yet. The people were behind me. I made a pass late on a hill. I was in pieces. And I was running on adrenaline, and I just remember like I was a half mile from the finish line and no one was behind me, and I started crying while I was running. You know what I mean? It was wild. I'll never forget that, ever, ever, ever. Yelling out loud. You know what I mean? Like crazy. Yeah.
And I would just say, something, a takeaway on that is you don't have to be a professional runner. You don't need to
100% no.
You don't need to run 50 or 60.
That does not define you. That does not define you.
You don't have to do all that stuff. But
nope.
If whatever your job is, whatever it is, and I think this is important, okay?
Yep.
With that whole exceptionalism, because I've heard somebody say, well, this just isn't my dream job. It's hard to be passionate about my dream job.
Totally.
Well, if you'll be passionate about what's not your dream job.
On the way to finding your dream job? Yeah.
You're going to get noticed, and that's how you get to the dream job.
Oh. You never know. Hey, man, tell me that's not true nowadays. You never know who's looking. You never know who's watching. You never know who's on the other end of the phone. You never know who's going to hear about that conversation, how it was received. And so I guess it's like be on your best behavior, but you never know. This world is so connected in such a good way, I think, for opportunities and people recognizing talent and stuff like that. Oh, man. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah,
hey,
don't just do it whenever... Don't just try to work to be exceptional whenever people are watching. Do it whenever they're not watching, because you never know when somebody's watching.
100%. I'm gonna close with something. I'm gonna leave the author nameless, but very interesting. It was the impetus for us having this conversation. The best thing you can do is be exceptionally good at something. Whatever abilities you have can't be taken away from you. They can't actually be inflated away from you either. So the best investment by far is anything that develops yourself. And it's not taxed either. Investing in yourself is the best thing you can do. Anything that improves your own talents. So pour into yourself, you know? That's how I feel.
Isn't that the Oracle from Omaha?
You could tell when he said taxed. You could tell he is a financier, right? It's like, but
well,
that
no,
was good.
I mean, I think
it was good, man.
I mean, the guy's exceptional. He was exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah, it's reality. Yeah, invest in yourself. That's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing. People are afraid to do this, and and to take out their own garbage, and to do an audit and be self-aware about what they might not be good at and stuff like that. And don't be afraid to do it and push the envelope. I think it's awesome. Nothing but good stuff comes out of it, man. Appreciate you, brother. Good stuff, man. Appreciate you.
All right. We'll see you guys later.